Hi everyone, this is the second video having a look at Paul within Acts, and in the first video we had a bit of a talk about who Paul was and why he's quite a significant character in the early church, and we had a look at his conversion story in Acts 9, and I just wanted to pull out a couple of particular elements from that and dive a little bit deeper into those in this second part. And first of all, I wanted to just have a little look at Ananias, because he is a fellow who really had to be very faithful and put his neck on the line for what God was asking him to do. Ananias obviously had a vision and was told by God exactly what was going to happen and what he needed to do. And he's told to rise and go to Straight Street and at the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul, and he'll be praying. And he's seen a vision of a man named Ananias come in and lay his hands on him so that he might regain his sight. But Ananias answered, rather understandably, I think we would all say, "Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much evil he has done to your saints at Jerusalem, and here he has authority from the chief priest to bind all those who call on your name." But the Lord said to him, "Go. For he is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. For I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name." And then Ananias goes, and we picked up the story from there earlier on. I think it's kind of an obvious point, but it's a great example of someone who really has to step out in faith for God. That is not an easy thing to be asked to do. To go to the house where the person who has been probably, most famous for persecuting Christians like yourself, he's holed up there, and you need to go, lay hands on him, heal him, and everything's going to be fine. What a bold move to take that step and do exactly what God has asked. And in all fairness, that's a pretty clear vision. It's one of those occasions where you look at it and go, I wish that God was that clear with me sometimes. But that represents how big an ask he was being asked to do, but also how important all of this was, because Paul was a very significant person and God had big plans for him. That leads on quite nicely though, because the vision that he was given talked about Paul's role in talking to the Gentiles. And as you move on to Jerusalem, again, actually, you've got the disciples, and they have to learn to trust Paul. So similar kind of thing to what happened with Ananias. But then after that, seeing what happens in Jerusalem is quite interesting, because you have to bear in mind that the church at this point, Peter and John have baptized thousands of people outside the temple at Pentecost. They have been a very visible and significant force within Jerusalem, and the temple must have been wondering, what on earth was going on? What had they let happen here? And when Paul comes along, with his background and his experience with the temple, his understanding of the scriptures, and his position in that society, people looked up to him, people respected him, and so the Christians must have really been looking at him and thinking, wow, this is going to be someone who can speak to the Jews in Jerusalem and convince them, those that haven't been convinced, to convince them once and for all that Jesus is our Saviour, that Jesus was the Messiah, and that that they should become Christians. And as you look in Acts 9, you go down to verse around about 28, it kind of kicks in. It says, he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. So he's sharing his story. He's talking about what's happened to him in Jerusalem. And he spoke out and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. And when the brothers learned of this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. So the church throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had peace and was being built up. So Saul became an instrumental person outside of Jerusalem, and eventually, of course, he moved further and further away. I mean, they sent him to Tarsus because that was his hometown, but the key thing is they had to get him out of Jerusalem. And it's kind of a bit topsy-turvy because you end up with Peter, a fisherman, preaching in front of the temple. Meanwhile, this guy who's really learned and academic, someone from within that clique, is unable to do that same job. But God had different plans for Paul, and that's obvious. And actually, when you look back at what the vision that Ananias was given and what he was told that Paul would be someone who would speak to the Gentiles and the kings, and that he would have a great importance there. And I think for many of us, we find ourselves in situations that are sometimes quite difficult at different points in our lives, and particularly when we're early in our Christian journeys. We might be in a position and in amongst people and have a real sense that God has put something on us to do. You know, he's given us a mission because that's where we are and we need to do something for God. And this is a really strong reminder of the way in which we actually just need to stay focused on God. Paul is someone who talks a lot about praying constantly. So for him, knowing what's on God's heart was what came first. He had to resist the temptation to look at it from a human point of view and to say, well, this is what I'm meant to be doing, and instead focus on the question, what does God want me to be doing? We can sometimes have the most unexpected journeys in front of us, and that God can have some really amazing things for us to do, but from where we are right now, we might never expect that to be the case. And we have to stay close to him. We have to look to God in prayer, and also we have to ask others for prayer on our behalf when we're at important milestones in our lives, etc. Make sure that we are on the right path and not just doing what makes common sense to us or what seems like a good idea. Thanks very much for listening. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments or drop us an email, hello@riversideburton.com. Next week, we've got Tim, and he's going to be talking about James. So we'll look forward to that. Thanks very much.